Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked here on the channel. This is the series where we talk about every single book on my shelves because it's book club time, guys. Today we're going to be talking about Grady Hendrix, the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. This is a horror novel. It is a supernatural, suspensey kind of thriller book from American author Grady Hendrix. If you want to know more about Grady Hendrix in general, go to last week's video or look it up yourself. This came out in April of 2020, so it's 4 years old now. I hadn't realised how much of a gap there was between this and My Best Friend's Exorcism, which we talked about last week. Wild. Just some things I will say that I said last week. Grady Hendrix, horror author, has written a bunch of stuff. Me, horror baby, have not read very much horror, have not appreciated many horror films, like the idea, love reading a synopsis on Wikipedia, am doubtless missing references. Please don't come at me for that. I bought this book myself regardless of where books come from. Nobody's paying me to talk about books except my patrons, and all opinions are my own. I'll keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible while still talking about the book as a whole. If you do want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, pause the video, come back when you've read it, we'll talk then, and I will link the story graph for the book down below in case you want to check out any user-generated content warnings. Patricia Campbell, our main character, is a bored and neglected southern housewife. Her only solace is her book club, which brings her great joy. They get to read true crime books together and have a wonderful time. But when James Harris comes to town and Patricia suspects him of being more than he seems, she thinks he's a vampire, can the ties that bind the book club protect her and their town from his influence? While this is a book about vampires, it is a horror novel about vampires, that is not just what the book is about. Similarly to how My Best Friend's Exorcism was not just about possessed teenagers. It's about classism, it's about women, it's about peeling back the veneer that's on this kind of idealised southern housewife lifestyle. It's interesting to me that it is a southern housewife from the 90s and not from the 50s, which is the stereotype we're so used to seeing. It adds a different layer to it, brings a bit more modernity. There's still nostalgia to it. I mean, the 90s are a while ago now, but it feels different still. I think the levels of technology that are in use, there's the idea of a changing world comes into play a lot in this as well. And I think Grady Hendrix is certainly playing off the things that were in the zeitgeist at the time. It's a very brutal horror book. I talked about this a lot when I was reading it. It just tips over the line for me as to what I'm personally comfortable with, but everyone's metric for horror varies. I suggest you check out the content warnings. But for those who like that more graphic, scary horror stuff, this might be one for you. But with all of that being said, the heart of the story is very human, and I think the things that Grady Hendrix is commenting on are much more about things that humanity does than things that the supernatural do in fiction. One thing that I found really interesting reading his author's note was the inspiration of serial killers and the idea of strangers coming to town and what makes things unsafe. And who is protected from being seen as unsafe in a small community? What characteristics might protect one from that opinion? I can see Grady Hendrix really has an understanding of these time periods across both of the books of his that I've read, and an understanding of the popular ideologies at the time and these kind of communities. He's writing what he knows in a very good way. I really like the slow start to this. It's very much a slow burn kind of story. A lot of time is spent in the story, and a lot of time is spent setting up communities, and Patricia and seeing how she changes over time is very important to the story, which I wouldn't necessarily expect from this kind of book. You would think it would be very, very fast-paced. Let's get to the point, let's do the action, let's get the horror in there. And I think it's almost even more insidious, the amount of time that is spent in this story. It's a very satisfying book on the whole in terms of the ending, but you do have to go through the ringer to get to the ending, which I know some people enjoy. I think Patricia as a character is very interesting because obviously she's the protagonist and we root for her, and you can see the struggles that she's going through as a woman in this time period and in the circumstances she is in. You very much care for her, and one of the things that Grady Hendrix does is also expose her internalized classism. She is not a perfect character by any means. She is not a untouchable heroine. There is a lot to do with children in communities and who is safe and who is unsafe. And I really liked that Grady Hendrix went there. And it's possibly something that's missing from Best Friend's Exorcism that you really get to explore in here. And I think especially putting it in the context of a book coming out in 2020 about the 90s, things that have and haven't changed in this kind of community was very interesting. But yes, Patricia, a strong character. I liked her a lot. I really liked how she is in some ways very stereotypical and in some ways pushing against those stereotypes, and just all of the ways in which Grady Hendrix exposes things about this period of time and the people living here, I really appreciate. I already mentioned the content warnings. I mentioned that it's a bit of a slow burn. Some people might not enjoy that. I mentioned that for me personally, it just bumps up against what I'm comfortable with. I wouldn't recommend it to everybody. I wouldn't necessarily say it's as beginner friendly as Best Friend's Exorcism was. I would read that first. I think it's very much there's a time and a place for me to read this, and sometimes I'm not in the right mindset. But at the time that I read this, I definitely was. Overall, I really like this book. I think it's got a lot going for it. It's really interesting. Unfortunately, I haven't heard great things about his subsequent books, though I don't think sought out any information about how to buy a haunted house. So that might be amazing. Yeah, I would read more from Grady Hendrix if it fell into my lap. I'm not seeking out horror at the moment, other than the T. Kingfisher books that I've been reading lately. Other things you might want to read, Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey is a really great example of a book that kind of explores serial killers in an interesting way. Also, T. Kingfisher, I've mentioned. I think that the combination of supernatural and non-supernatural is something that's definitely cropped up in her work before. And in case you came across this video without seeing last week's video, My Best Friend's Exorcism is the other Grady Hendrix book that I definitely recommend. Should you read this? I would say absolutely yes. I think it is a great time. I think if you are equipped to deal with a horror novel, then you should read this. If not, you can let this one go. We've had a couple of kind of holiday weeks here on Dead Good Book Reviews talking about things I don't normally talk about, but overall I like them a lot. Have you read this? Do you have plans to? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also come hang out on Discord where we have chill chats about books. I'd like to say an enormous thank you to all the ghosts who haunt me over on Patreon. They support the channel and in return get early access to videos, bonus content, live streams, and more. If you'd like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thank you so much to you for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. Today, we're going to be talking about Grady Hendrix, The Southern Book Club. I can never say it. Put some intro music in. Don't forget to put the music in. I don't think I did disclaimers for last week's video, which I could film now, but I'm not going to. If anyone wants to comment that I've been wearing this shirt in my last 4 to 5 videos, no, you don't get to comment. It's a good shirt. Leave me alone.